On Christmas week, I heard a child screaming for help inside my neighbor's house, but he didn't have kids. I'm Alex. My fiance and I bought our first house 3 years ago, a quiet, normal neighborhood in Ohio, a place where people walk their dogs and decorate their lawns like they're competing in a Christmas contest. We felt safe here. That's what makes what happened so hard to process, even now. Our neighbor, on the right, Paul, was always polite, but distant. In his 40s, lived alone, rarely talked beyond a quick wave. Quiet guy. The kind you don't think twice about. Until that December. I realized I hadn't seen him for about a week. His car didn't move, his blinds were always shut, but his Christmas lights stayed on every night, glowing neatly along the roofline. I even joked to my fiance that he was hibernating for winter. But 2 nights before Christmas, something changed. I was outside putting up the last of our decorations, late, like always, and out of nowhere, Paul's Christmas lights started flickering violently. Not normal flickering, not like a loose wire. They were flashing in bursts, almost like signals. It made my stomach tighten a bit. Not fear, just confusion. The next morning, his car still hadn't moved, all blinds still shut, lights still on. We brushed it off. That night, my fiance came inside and said, "Paul's lights are doing that flickering thing again." I stepped outside. Same exact chaotic flashing. But halfway through, the lights suddenly stopped. Clean. Still. Like nothing had happened. Something felt wrong. Not paranormal wrong, just human wrong. So I decided to check on him. I went over and knocked. No answer. I rang the bell. No movement behind the blinds, just silence. I rang again. Finally, the door opened, just a crack at first, and Paul stood there. His eyes looked tired, not sick, not scared, more like someone who hadn't slept in days. Gentle expression. "Hey, sorry to bother you. Your lights were flickering a ton last night. Thought you should know." He blinked, confused. Then he glanced toward the street, almost like he wanted to check who else might be outside. "Oh, I didn't notice. Thanks." His tone wasn't rude, just off. Like he was rushing the conversation in his head. I nodded, then casually said, "Everything okay? Haven't seen you around." "Just under the weather." Before I could respond, a sound came from inside his house, a sharp, muffled yell. It was quick, a single burst, but unmistakable. A child yelling something that sounded like help. I froze. My face probably gave everything away because Paul immediately shifted his body to block more of the doorway. Soft, tight expression. I thought I heard something. Paul didn't blink, didn't move, just stared at me. "Have a good night." And he closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. Quiet. Intentional. I stood there for a second, trying to rationalize. Maybe a TV, maybe I imagined it, but no. My brain replayed that sound over and over. I walked back home fast. When I told my fiance, she stared at me like I'd just told her a ghost story. "You heard a kid? In his house? Paul doesn't have kids." I said exactly what I was already thinking. "I think we need to call the police." When I explained to the 911 operator, I kept my voice steady, factual. A neighbor who lived alone, lights flickering strangely, no sign of him leaving the house, and a clear sound of a child yelling. They sent officers immediately. Within minutes, squad cars lined the street. They knocked once, waited, and then entered with permission under welfare check protocols. We watched from our window. 10 minutes inside. 15 minutes. Then suddenly, one officer came running out the front door yelling something to the others. The other officers rushed downstairs towards the basement. My fiance grabbed my arm. "Oh my God, Alex." I didn't breathe until they brought someone out. A small boy, maybe 9, barefoot, shaking, wrapped in a blanket by the EMTs. I felt this cold wave go through me. Not horror, not shock, just disbelief at how close we'd come to doing nothing. Later, police told us the boy had been missing from a town nearly 30 minutes away. He'd been locked in Paul's basement for 4 days. 4 days. Here's the part that still gives me chills. The flickering Christmas lights? That was the boy. He found a way, from the basement, to mess with the breaker panel just enough to flash the exterior lights. Every time someone walked outside, he tried again, trying to make chaos, trying to make someone look, trying to get saved. He heard me knocking, probably saw me through the tiny blocked basement window. That's why the light stopped the second Paul opened the door. He didn't want to get caught. Paul was arrested on the spot. The charges were horrifying, and he won't be getting out anytime in this lifetime. But the worst part for me, that moment on his doorstep, when I almost walked away, when that kid was just a few feet away, screaming into a soundproof basement. Every Christmas, when I see the lights on our street flicker for every second, my chest tightens. Because now I know, sometimes the scariest thing in a neighborhood isn't a stranger. It's the person you thought you knew. On Christmas Eve, someone kept knocking on our door, but every time we opened it, no one was there. I'm Daniel. I was 17 when this happened. My family rented a small cabin deep in northern Michigan for Christmas. We wanted a quiet holiday away from everything. And for a while, it really was quiet. Too quiet. The cabin was old, the kind of place where the wood settles loudly and the wind whistles through gaps in the siding. My younger sister Emma kept complaining she felt watched through the windows, but we thought she's just making it up. It was Christmas Eve, around 10 p.m., when the first knock came to the door. A slow, heavy thud against the door. We all froze. The cabin was miles from the nearest house. No neighbors, no cars passing, no reason for anyone to be there. My dad grabbed a flashlight and checked the porch. No one. He locked the door, shrugged it off, and told us it was probably an animal. We tried to go back to playing cards. None of us really could. 10 minutes later, the second knock hit the door. Louder, sharper, like someone testing us. My dad stood up again, slower this time. He forced a small laugh. That's weird. He opened the door cautiously, checked the porch twice, scanning the tree line. He was clearly trying to reassure himself more than us. Nothing. The cold air rushed in, and for a second I felt this strange heaviness, like someone had just been there but slipped away. Then Emma pointed at the steps. "Dad, the snow." There were footprints leading to the cabin, only coming towards us. My dad stepped closer, squinting. There are prints coming up the steps, but with the wind last night, I can't tell if any went back. His voice was tight, like he didn't want to admit how wrong it looked. We locked every window, every door. Dad said it was fine, but even he kept glancing outside. We tried to sleep. I lay awake listening to the cabin creak, the wind pushing against the walls, the faint rustling of trees outside. Around 2 a.m., a soft shuffling sound came from the porch, slow, dragging, like someone shifting their weight. Then a voice, right at the door, whispered my name. "Daniel." I sat up so fast my head spun, my hands went numb, and I had to swallow before I could breathe again. The voice wasn't angry, it wasn't loud. It sounded patient, like it had all night to wait. I didn't move. I didn't answer. I just listened. "Daniel, open." My dad burst out of his room and went straight to the door, breathing hard but silent. He put his ear against it. Nothing. Whoever or whatever was outside stopped the moment he approached. He turned to me. "We're not staying another night. Start packing quietly." At sunrise, we shoved everything into the car and drove without even eating breakfast. When we finally reached town, we stopped at a gas station and all got out just to breathe normally again. My dad looked like he hadn't slept in days. We didn't argue about it. We didn't analyze it. We just didn't talk about the cabin again. A week later, the rental owner called my dad. "Did you leave something on the back door?" My dad said no. The owner paused. He said there was a message smeared across the frost on the back window of the cabin. 2 words. "Next Christmas." Written sloppily, uneven strokes, like someone dragging something sharp through the ice. No footprints, no signs of forced entry. Just that message, waiting for us. We never found out who or what was outside our door that night. But every year when Christmas comes around, I catch myself listening a little too closely for that third knock. On Christmas night, I saw a man in a red coat standing in our living room. The terrifying part? He wasn't supposed to be inside the house. I'm Jenna, and Christmas is still ruined for me because of one night I can't make sense of. A night when a stranger somehow slipped into our home without breaking a single door or window. I was 19, home from college for the holidays. We lived in a small town in Vermont, quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where people still leave their doors unlocked. My parents trusted the town. I didn't. Christmas Eve had been warm and calm. My parents went to bed early, and I stayed up downstairs, scrolling through my phone, half watching a Christmas movie on low volume. The lights from the tree were the only real source of brightness. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard a soft sound from the kitchen. Not a creak, more like a fabric shuffle, as if someone brushed against the counter. "Mom?" I got up slowly and peeked around the doorway. Nobody. I told myself it was just the house settling and went back to the couch. But a few minutes later, I caught something in my peripheral vision. A shadow moving behind the tree. Very deliberately. I froze. My heartbeat picked up. Not fast, but hard, like each beat was knocking against my ribs. I leaned forward slightly, trying to see better. The lights from the tree flickered off something red. At first I thought it was just an ornament reflecting, but then the shape shifted. A man, a full-grown man wearing a long red coat hood pulled up, standing perfectly still behind the tree. His back was to me, like he was studying something on the wall. He wasn't moving. He wasn't making a sound. What the? Who? I stood up way too fast and grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a ceramic snowman decoration. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I kept my eyes on the tree. The man didn't move an inch. But this is the part that messed with me. There was no sign of how he got in. All the locks were locked. The windows were closed, sealed for winter. And I never heard footsteps. I took a slow step backward, trying not to make noise. That's when he finally turned his head. Not fully, just enough for me to see the side of his face under the hood. But it wasn't a normal turn. It was slow, mechanical, like he was only moving because he realized he'd been seen. I didn't breathe. He didn't speak. We just stood there, across the living room, both of us waiting for the other to move. And then, he lifted one gloved finger and pointed to the floor, to a small, rectangular object sitting beside the tree. A key. My dad's garage key. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My throat locked. I backed toward the stairs, whispering my mom's name repeatedly, but the words barely left my mouth. When I hit the first step, the man very calmly walked around the tree, slow, relaxed, almost casual, and slipped into the hallway leading to the back door. I rushed into my parents' room, flipping the light on. "Dad, there's someone in the house! Someone's inside!" He jumped out of bed and ran downstairs with me, right behind him. But when we reached the hallway, the back door was open, snow blowing inside. My dad grabbed a flashlight and followed the fresh tracks onto the porch. They went across the backyard, down the property line, and then straight into the woods. Just one set, one intruder. The police arrived within 15 minutes. They checked every room, every lock, every window. And that's when the officer said something that still scares me. All the locks are untouched. Whoever he was, he had a key. I told them about the key I saw by the tree, but when we checked, It was gone. Someone had taken it. We changed every lock in the house the next morning, added cameras, alarms, motion lights. But none of that changed the fact that someone had been inside our home on Christmas Eve, watching us, moving silently, retreating calmly like he had done this before. A week later, my dad found something next to the garage door. A gift box, wrapped neatly, no tag. Inside was our old garage key and a single note. See you next year. We didn't stay for the next Christmas. We left town entirely. But every December, when the nights get colder, I can't help glancing at dark corners and dim windows, half expecting to see that red coat again.